Community Preservation Act Committee, this is March 27th, Wednesday, and we're starting a little later than we had expected, but we're here now, we haven't got enough people, so.
Oh, you already have.
Let's get started on item 1, acceptance of minutes from 3:12 and 3:13. I have those, Megan emailed those to me, and I didn't realize it, but I didn't email them back to have them some copies made for everybody, so I will do that for the next meeting. And I don't know about 3:20.
Yes, we're passing them
Those are the
around.
ones you have? Okay.
Well, actually, it's 321. I don't know why it says 320 on.
Oh, I don't know, it says 3:20
Should
on
be
the agenda.
321.
Should be 3:21, okay, so this is on the agenda. Thank you. All right, everybody want to take a quick look at those and see if we can.
I just corrected this because it's development. It had development on it, so I put development.
Thank you.
In regards to the one Hollywood thing, I used to work there. So for me, I love reading at like one Hollywood.
I know it's usually written out.
It's the word, yeah. Doesn't matter though. It just,
Well, that's okay, it should be what it is, so it's not
So
the
it should be
numbers.
ON.
Yeah.
I was following the grammatical rules of you
No.
spell every number that's under a
the
word.
word.
But what is the title?
So the
Yeah,
one,
right.
yeah.
So it's usually with the just
One
the
Hollywood CDC with the word together.
Is one holding together?
Yeah, it's one word. And I no longer work there, but it just,
You're used to it.
yeah, I'm used to it.
That's the one that, okay, you didn't mention about Mike, I forgot his name,
Moriarty?
Mike Moriarty came and talked to us for a while after Marcos was done.
Oh, it says number 5, discussion with
Yeah,
Mike
it's in the
Moriarty concerning for.
Oh, it's farther down? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was the back.
Okay, because that should go after, that should go after 2, and then.
Yeah, sometimes I'm not quite sure where, I try to group things by topic, even if really what we did was,
Well, yeah, but it should follow what we did in the meeting. So
okay.
don't, yeah.
So
So Mike
I'll
Moriarty.
move 3 and 4 to after that, even though part of 3 happened early and part happened later.
It did sort of.
No, 3 happened later, because I was gone by the time that happened.
Yeah.
And 4, I don't know, let me see.
Can do.
I think,
I don't know what that's about.
I think city
wasn't
four,
here.
4 was when Mike explained how the thing just went through on committee, in front of the council, I think.
Oh, was that
Yeah.
when you were talking about, oh, city council approval process, okay, yes, I was here for that.
Yes.
So, yeah, 4 should go before 3. And so 5 should go, and 5 should go before 4.
Can do.
For number 7, could you just add, we can hire a preservation consultant, just to make it a little more specific?
Under the
second
context
bullet
which we
point.
approved for
Under
historic
7.
petitions, so historic consultant,
Or preservation consultant?
preservation,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. All right. It just, yeah.
Okay, I made those changes as you.
Okay.
Okay, and I've made a note to email everybody the other minutes, so.
Yeah, I know, so.
So motion to approve the meetings with changes?
There's a tiny little grammatic on that first bullet item, train station. I think the last unclear maybe needs to be deleted, is that right?
Where is it?
But unclear, the level of that interest unclear. I would just strike the last word unclear.
Where is this?
It's the first sentence, it says train station.
Oh, yeah, you wrote it twice, yeah.
Oh, okay, right,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, so a motion's been made to accept the minutes with editing. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor to accept the minutes for 3/21?
Aye.
With the changes, thank you. Okay, discussion of protocol for CPC review process. Is that you, Amy?
Yeah, I thought I had made copies. Hold on, let me just look through my stuff.
Is this the stuff from Crystal?
No,
No.
this is something that Megan, she had an idea about this and I sort of added to it and I didn't get to copy it, but anyway, we were talking about how it might be good to establish a protocol, sort of a system for going through the different projects. And I can email everyone later. So for example, this wouldn't all happen in one meeting, okay? So for the first one might be, and I did email actually, I emailed you this a while ago, would be for the point person for that project. Like remember when you assign people different projects, that person would just sort of walk the group through the project, just, you know, sort of give a little summary of it. And then the next item would be that I would alert the group to any concerns, including need for restrictions or legal issues. Then after that, there would be sort of an open discussion, and then maybe a preliminary vote, kind of like what you did with the first bunch of projects. And then the next thing would be to discuss the rationale for the vote, so that I can, so the staff can create needed documents for city council, you know, because they do want more information in the future. And this would ensure that everyone is in agreement about why they're voting the way they're voting, and allow people to change their minds if they want to. Because in terms of like best practices, I actually do have something I can give you to show you right now. I'm talking about, actually, not right now. You want to lay out what the conditions will be, because the applicant may not really want the award if they won't agree to the conditions later on down the line when you're doing the contract. So that's why it's good to figure out what the conditions will be for the applicant.
Yeah.
So the rationale is first, like why are you voting to approve this project? Why do you think this would be good for the city of Holyoke? Because that's important if the city council has questions, you know, to answer that. And also, what are the basic conditions they have to abide by? And then finally, the official vote, and then figuring out like a timeline for getting it to the mayor 7 days in advance, and then to the city council, and then figuring out who needs to be present in case the city council asks questions. Because I mean, even though I know that you can't just randomly speak at city council, I would assume that
Well,
you
at the
could.
finance committee level, you can.
Right, but even at the city council level, if you're in the audience section and there's a city council person with a question, they could ask it and then you can answer it, right? So,
If they want to,
Waive the rules.
waive the rules, if they want to
oh, okay.
suspend the rules.
Well, I just think it's good to be ready for that, so I'm sorry I don't have copies of this. Like, I was making
I've seen them
some.
in the past call for like, to call you in for the next meeting so that they can have you
Right,
present then.
Yeah.
Like, so if they have a question, all right, so the next meeting, they'll call you in
Mhm.
for another meeting
Yeah.
and present at that meeting.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
you would
We
have
do
time.
periodically
Yeah.
move to suspend the rules. It
Yeah,
happens with
and they do
citizens
that too
all
from
the
time to time.
Yeah, they do. The conditions, I don't think we should have to maybe discuss that until after the city council votes.
well, I'm not talking about presenting the conditions to city council.
No.
I'm talking about among
Reasons
this
for voting,
group.
yeah.
It's
Right.
important to determine what the conditions are going to be, like, remember when I talked about restrictions and all that kind of thing? Because the person getting the award, and I've consulted with like the Somerville staff person, they said they may not want the award if they don't agree to those conditions.
Right, they don't
And
want the
that's
conditions.
going to have to be written into a contract, so it's, even though it's hard to figure those things out, it's important to have those up front for the applicant. So you know, I know this is our
Yeah.
first year, but this is what I think is really important to follow.
Yeah, I'm thinking that, you know, this is my own personal opinion, that the conditions, we shouldn't do that till after when we're discussing with the city solicitor about how she's going to write up the contract. And if the, you know, applicant wants to see what those conditions, you know, if they want to know ahead of time, we can let them know that. But, you know, I don't see the need to do that before the city. I mean, we have a lot of stuff to get done before the city, before the city council votes.
In many cases, how we can possibly even vote to approve something until we know
Yeah.
under what conditions.
Right, that's my point.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my point,
Most grants are like that, there's conditions attached to them
Yeah.
before you apply to them.
Yeah.
You know it ahead of time before you apply to it, so that way you can make a decision
Well,
to
no,
say.
we're not
Most
talking
of
about
them,
the
not all.
applicant, yeah, we're not talking about.
but if suddenly the applicant has a contract in front of them with all these conditions that
Right.
they've never discussed before, they'll be like, wait a minute, this isn't what I applied for, you know.
And what
so-
about us? You know, there may well be an applicant where this, you know, under X conditions, you would support it, but if they won't agree to X conditions, you wouldn't want to vote for
Right,
it.
you don't wanna vote for it, that's the other part too.
And it is not, if somebody says, you know, I would vote for this if we are funding, you know, access for this particular group of kids downtown,
Right.
say. And as long as we can get those kids, sure, but if the applicant won't or isn't interested in providing those programs, you know, for that access, or won't provide, you know, restoration of such and such a historical feature, then no, we have other applicants we try to fund.
Right.
And we
I
have to
feel
know
like,
that.
I feel like we discussed all the things, the conditions, or the concerns that we had about, and so that they,
Well, we did for the projects before us, but
Yes.
that's why I think they have to be in protocol, because we literally can't necessarily vote unless we know what conditions we would apply to the award.
I wouldn't want to vote for an improvement to a park or an improvement to a court or something like that if the rest of the community is not going to be able to use it.
well, yes,
Right,
we
you
talk about that stuff.
No, I-
We do that, so-
Right, but I think
So-
what they're alluding to is like moving
Yeah,
forward.
I understand their point, but I think we already made
Oh,
all
I get
those
what you're
points
saying.
before
I get what
we
you're saying.
did vote. I think we made those points.
Yes, and the point
Yeah.
is merely that we should always be doing that.
Yes,
I understand what you're saying.
Well, I found that even when I was doing the stained glass, you know, write-up, which is relatively simple, there's a section, you know, where you're supposed to say measures for success and conditions, you know, these are best practices. And so, because you don't want the city council or somebody theoretically to say, oh, well, we didn't vote to approve that, or money coming out of that fund, you know, so that's why it's good to have it all up front if possible. I mean, I know that we're not gonna go back and redo the ones that have been
Right,
approved,
right,
but I'm just
right.
saying that, like, I had to sort of figure out what to put there, because we hadn't really laid out all of that, you know, except that, yeah, it must meet the Secretary of the Interior standards and things like that, but there, you know, there's still certain, like, benchmarks that I would think each applicant has to complete you know, you have to describe the scope of work and how much should be completed by when, you know, so it's not just the final deadline, but
yeah. But
as an
that's- yeah,
example.
I feel like that should come at the end too, when we're doing the contract with them. But that's just my opinion, that's okay.
Well, that's not usually how CPA communities do it. They usually discuss, you know, decide on the restrictions and what they are expecting of the applicant in detail. And they expect more detail from the applicants, you know.
Okay. All right. So we'll keep that for future reference, or we're gonna do that now with Pine Street, with the 123 Pine Street?
Well, I wanted to share updates from item 3. It's updates from Stuart Saginor.
Okay, so that was just a discussion, so we're all set with that item 2? We don't have to?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you, okay, updates from
Okay,
item
so
3.
about 123 Pine Street, I asked him, remember how we were saying like maybe the funding could come out of the housing reserve since there's like about 50,000 left, and that would take less out of the unreserved. Oh, you didn't get a copy of this. Let's see.
Yeah, that's right, Marcos too, I mean Marco.
And I'll explain it later.
Marco too. Marco.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
So, because there's about 100,000 in each of the reserves: housing, open space, and historic. We still had 50,000 after 347 Chestnut Street left over, so we were looking into that. So I was trying to find out from Stuart Saginor if the 123 Pine Street, since they have a developer who wants to do affordable housing, if we could change the category and say this is housing creation or housing preservation instead of historic. Are people following me? Okay. And so what he said is definitely not. This should be a historic project, and this is what I thought he was going to say in the last meeting. Not a housing project, because the application they submitted, which I shared with him, actually says right at the beginning that this is one of the city's priority endangered historic resources. He said the CPC can't ignore the fact that it's a significant historic resource. By switching this to a housing project, there would be no protection for the historic nature of the building, and the funding for one category of CPA housing could easily be used to destroy something that is extremely important to the historic category. So he's saying that by recommending this funding as a historic project, did you want to say?
No, so I hear what he was saying, but at the same time, you could also flip that and say it could also be used to improve the outlook of Holyoke and whatever, but that's
Well,
neither here nor
let me
there.
just finish what he said.
Yeah.
So he said that if it's recommended under the historic grant as he originally applied for, both categories would be served. The developer would have to follow the Secretary of the Interior standards for historic rehabilitation in doing the work, but it's certainly possible to do so and turn the building into housing. The tricky part, he said, is when only part, and this is what you raised when we were talking about, I think, the developer incentives, like this, when only one part of the funding is funded by CPA, like in this situation, the 150,000, you could end up with CPA funds being used properly for the historic aspect of the rehab, say the windows or whatever it is, while the non-CPA funds that the developer is using could go to work that doesn't follow the proper guidelines. This is what you were bringing up, right? That we don't know what they'll actually do, whether the whole project, the end result, will be in keeping with historic preservation.
Yeah, so we'd have to condition it really carefully.
Exactly, and so that's what he said. So they've run into difficult situations with just that situation, that the non-CPA funds go towards things that destroy the historic features. So what he said is the CPC should make their vote contingent on the entire project or the entire exterior following the Secretary of the Interior standard. So even the parts that are funded by something else must follow that. So.
Okay.
But Marcos was disappointed. I've had some back and forth with him. He was interpreting it differently, but I've had a lot of conversations with Stuart, so he's already said this to me, that this is what other CPA communities try to do. They say, oh, well, let's just take this out of housing, but you can't. Once it's been established this is a historic resource, you can't do that, so.
Couldn't they come back a successive year and then apply for housing improvements once the historic stuff is done? Like that would be okay, right?
At what cost?
Well, I think they might still
Yeah.
have to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Yeah, well, they've already done that on a previous application, and that work's all complete. They can come back later on and apply for housing to renovate the interior of the apartment units.
But Margaret, wouldn't by definition, or Amy, by definition, excuse me for interrupting, pardon me. Amy, by definition, if they did the outside, are they obligated as an historic preservation undertaking to historically preserve the inside along with the outside?
I don't think so, because I just don't see how that, I don't think
I
that the
don't either. I
inside
didn't
is.
know if the National Register
I don't think so.
would say, look, this is an historic townhouse.
I think it's always the exterior. 'Cause
It's
I mean,
exclusively the
I
exterior.
doubt that the interior has even been maintained in a historic way.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm just wondering if somebody would
I think it's
give
just.
I did some research.
Just the exterior?
I think it's just the exterior.
Did Stuart say that? It's just the exterior that we're referring to?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
So I did some research.
I mean, you
on
can do
property.
historic interiors, but I don't think that the interior would have to be done. But anyway, let's
Yeah.
hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
So I did some research looking into the property, and it's interesting because of course, when an applicant writes a grant, they're aware of the category of funding in which they're writing it. And so he was writing it knowing he was applying for historic rehabilitation.
Yeah, that's true.
But when I looked at the way that the Holyoke Redevelopment Authority proposed the RFP for this property and all the packaging around it, everything was about housing. So although it does lead off by describing it as a historic building, that's the only way in which they ever refer to it as being historic. They don't ever share anything about the fact that it, what its history was. It focuses all on its nature as being housing in the past and being a good potential site for housing now. So that's how it's described in the urban renewal plan, which also has aerial photographs, it has maps, it has a detailed assessment that they did around the environmental degradation. They've already done work in the building to remove hazardous waste. So there's already been significant work done on the property by the Holyoke Redevelopment Authority. That was around making it a property ready for development as housing. And it specifies that it's a 4-story multifamily building. It's currently spec'd as 8 apartment units. And it actually has outlined exactly how many square footage each one is. So they very much already have a vision for this building being housing. And while it may be historic in terms of the fact that it's always been housing from 1901, it has actually always been housing.
Yeah, but it doesn't, it still has to come out of historic though.
And the interior of the building, there's extensive photography, shows that it would need to be gutted and redone.
Yeah.
And they've actually done some significant work inside to stabilize it and that sort of thing as well.
The redevelopment, Holyoke Redevelopment has done this?
Yeah.
Who paid for it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I digged a little bit deeper, I could find it, but I didn't find it in the proposal package they had.
There's been different owners of that.
I mean, I
No, I mean,
checked with
her
Stuart.
point of reference was the Holyoke Redevelopment Authority. I was just wondering who picked up the tab to have it
I don't
restructured.
know if it's redevelopment,
We
they
must
doesn't have
have
any,
grant funding.
they don't have any funding, yeah.
Yeah, but we should not be surprised that a project might apply for more than one round of CPA. So there's no reason why somebody couldn't do historic work on the outside,
Stages.
and it has its own, what's it called, the prerequisites that you can't change anything there. And then come back another year and say, we're gonna renovate all the interiors this year. And there's no reason why we wouldn't.
And also the developer that they have may be able to get funds to do that kind of interior, which he'll need to do.
And that doesn't mean though that they're gonna come back and somehow
Right.
modify the historic nature of the previous
Right, I
work.
think as long as they leave the external, I think it would have to be the exterior.
And if they don't get the funding to do the inside?
Yeah, that's actually bad for us, because
Yeah.
if we've already approved the redoing the outside, and then the inside falls apart, and people don't use the building, then.
That's a lot of money.
Well, it's the same thing for the other project that they're doing, and we're hoping they're gonna get that grant we're
Yeah, but that condition of the two,
What other project?
The one on Chestnut Street.
just the two, across the street from each other,
Yeah,
They've already got people living in Chestnut.
right,
both situations, yeah.
right.
There's
but
no, I don't think there's anybody living in 123.5.
No, but no, that's
Yeah,
not,
there's
the point is that we're giving them money to fix the outside of that building, but they wanna do it, it's part of a huge project, and they're hoping to get the rest, so.
But that's not out of our pocket though.
No.
So, I mean, that's
They
an
may
event.
not, what I'm saying is, like you said, they may not get the rest of the
Right,
money.
which means the money we gave them will be a wash.
Yeah, I mean,
You know what I mean?
these are the taxpayers' money we just assigned to this building.
Yeah.
5 years later,
Yeah, but this is just like
Why-
anything
why'd you
else.
do that?
It's condition, it's so that the money doesn't
It
come
looks the
out.
same.
In the future though, if we flag that ahead of time by having, one of us kind of vet the issue, and if we were smart enough to pick it up, couldn't we go back to the applicant and say, you know what, rather than renovate the inside when you don't have residents, why don't you change your category? I mean, couldn't you do that?
I mean, at this point, don't we eliminate this basic problem by saying if we fund this, that the funding is contingent on they're putting the project together and the grants coming through? And
Yeah, that's
like
just-
everything
yeah,
that
else,
does
we
make
will
That's
have.
like the Victory Theater.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, everything
The
has
money
to
is
come
held
together.
up
Yeah.
if they don't get for the time it takes them to review this. But our interest is protected and we don't have to worry about.
That's
So
good.
this is what I
You don't
mean
get your
about
payout
conditions,
until
that
you
will be our
move on to the
condition.
next stage, right.
When
Yeah,
it's
but we
time
don't, but
to
we
write up
have,
the agreement.
yeah, but we cannot, and my point is, we can't vote on whether to offer them funding until we've agreed that, we're going to do it this way or we're going to do it another way.
Right, and
Right.
that's what we always do, we talk about it,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I also wanted to say what Marcos was saying in emails back and forth. He said things are moving very quickly on his end with 123 Pine Street and the developer. They should be getting a formal development proposal this week, which will be taken up by the HRA board Wednesday, April 3rd.
Yeah, see,
If it's approved that evening, they'd be able to, well, this is when he thought that they might have to change the application, but as we're saying, I don't think that he should change the application. Prior to the April 11th midday city council filing deadline. He said that's the filing deadline for April 16th. I'm confused though, is both city council and the finance committee meeting the same day?
No,
City council is meeting April 16th, but not the finance
no,
committee?
that was April 19th, the finance committee meeting.
Oh, okay.
But
so-
I'm hoping he would, well. we'll see.
So he's thinking about this
I don't know what
deadline
Joe's gonna do. I
for
haven't-
filing it is April 11th for the
Yeah.
16th meeting, so he's
Mhm.
concerned about that, making sure that the decision, I guess. But what he was saying is that on April 3rd, if we had a meeting that day, he could actually come from that meeting to let us know if it was approved to our meeting. Right afterwards, he could do that. Or we could have our meeting on April 10th. And find, we would know by then what he did, whether it was
What day of the week is that?
I think it's a Wednesday, let me just look. Yeah, that's a Wednesday, April 3rd and April 10th are on Wednesdays.
All right. Okay, so,
Okay, and then I also have information about 43 Canal Street, the Flats headquarters building. So I shared that with him and asked questions about, what their plan was. And he said most CPCs would want more fully developed plans. I mentioned, how he's talking about doing the stucco, the dormers, the accessibility ramp, the lighting, and the signage. He said for the dormers, for example, do they have pictorial evidence, or, they did send photos, but do they have an original plan showing the exact dormers that will be constructed? He said you would need that to be sure it was in keeping with the historic period you're looking to restore the building to. And he said maybe the Holyoke Historic Commission can approve the plan. I think this was what we were saying, that some of these would be contingent on the Holyoke Historic Commission approving the plan before they could get funding. So like they get funding contingent on HHC really reviewing the specific plan. And then in terms of the ramp, he said an independent historic preservation expert would need to decide what was proper. And he thought maybe the Historic Commission could help, but I don't know. And I don't know, Elaine, I think you were here when I mentioned this. The good news is that we could hire a preservation consultant starting July 1st, because that's the new city fiscal year. And they would be able to work on these kinds of projects, or to advise, through the admin fund.
we could do that.
So just letting you know. So anyway, he said, or the CPC, like I said, could fund, this is what I just said, a bit of extra money to have a historic consultant advise the developer that's the best practice for the situation. Because even though, yeah, they didn't have accessibility ramps in the old days, you still don't want some ugly metal ramp there that would be completely not fitting with the aesthetic of the historic work. So there does need to be some thought put into that. You can just throw down any old ramp and have it,
Amy, excuse me for interrupting. So by definition, Stuart is saying, if you put a ramp in, for example, if you have a metal ramp, it would have to be constructed in such a way as to make it look somewhat historical and congruent with the building. Like if
Yeah, you would
dressed it
have
up
to
a little.
have, he's suggesting that we have a preservation consultant, consult to advise the developer on what sort of ramp material. He might say, no, it shouldn't be metal, it should be something else,
Right,
you know.
right, right. So is that imperative, excuse me, is that imperative for them to build that ramp? Is that like a condition? Like if you're gonna build a ramp, you're gonna have to get a historic architect, for example?
It's the best
decide-
practice. It's what's
Okay.
considered best practice.
Okay, so by definition, it's not a legal requirement. I'm just,
Well, I don't really know why why the committee would want to fund a historic rehabilitation project and not care about
no,
what
I'm
the
with you.
ramp looks like. So,
No, I'm with you. I just didn't know
Yeah.
if there was a state law or
no,
a
it's
historical.
the best practice. yeah.
Okay,
My inclination is just to do the stucco on that building. I wouldn't even go into he said that the last three things anyways weren't something that they had to, that he would figure out how to get that done some other way, but even the dormer,
Yeah.
if it's gonna be more information that he's gonna need and more consulting, then he can wait and come back in the next round of funding for the dormer.
Or we could hire a consultant
dormer.
who,
And
and he
when-
has to say, I will listen to the consultant. So even if the consultant says you need to use more expensive materials,
Right.
it costs more than, what you're getting, he has to follow that.
But we're not gonna hire a consultant until after the 1st of July, so that's not gonna
But that's
help.
okay because the contract probably, you don't think the contract will be, you think the contract has to be signed before then?
They have to be signed before July 1st, yes.
They do?
Yes,
Why?
because that we're starting a new round of
That's a new
funding
fiscal
July
Oh,
1st.
okay, all right, I see what
The
you're
end
saying.
of the fiscal year.
That's the end of the fiscal
Uh-huh.
year.
This is out
Well,
of order,
okay.
but does anyone know, because I'm not seeing it on this page, and I see all of our projected grants. What I don't see is how much money we actually have left.
Yeah, that's at the bottom. The bottom is showing, this is the amount that's left over, that's the undesignated fund.
but Randy,
See,
where are you?
This is if all things are funded, but can I get to that later?
Well, just because, I only jumped into this point because we are talking now about, it sounds to me, potentially spending every penny we have left, and I am not.
Yeah, actually, if you ended up funding 123 Pine Street, 1 Holyoke CDC Flats, the Flats building, and Maple Street, that would come to over $222,470. So you cannot fund all of those with what's left over, which is $172,689.
Yeah, and
You can't.
I kind of felt like maybe we should start thinking about that.
Yeah.
Just stop right there? like
Well,
at
just be aware of
173?
it,
No,
as
it's
we go
okay.
through this.
Yeah,
Not, are you thinking just the base amount we should stay?
yeah, well, I think once we are done, and I don't mean to completely derail this conversation, because I missed last time, I was unclear about whether we were having this conversation in this forum because it was the sense of the committee that, in fact, we were going to fund all of these things or try to, or whether we were still even thinking about the phase. Because I do still think that as we make our final decisions, it is worth asking ourselves whether we want to spend every penny at our disposal this year, or whether we maybe want to roll some funds over to possibly apply to, projects that weren't applied for this round. Keep some money in the treasury as a reserve to build on.
That's a good point, because I've already gotten inquiries from other people, including someone who wants to do something in partnership with the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club on Mount Tom, and maybe you've heard about that, some kind of environmental recreation center. And, there are a lot of people inquiring now, so there could be really good projects coming in,
Well, here's the thing, as of July 1st, we'll have the full amount for next year
We
already.
will, but that doesn't mean we will have enough money to fund everything next year either.
You're gonna have
And we
more
just
next year.
don't know.
We can't worry about projects we don't have.
Yeah, no, we'll have half as much money because it will only be 1 year's worth.
Right.
We will have a much wider basis of people from whom we are getting projects because word gets out.
Yeah, it's gotten out,
And
believe me.
we honestly, I don't know why we would assume that we won't like some of what comes in next year
Oh,
better
I'm sure
than what
we
is in
will.
front of us
I'm sure
now.
we're gonna love it.
And if there is a possibility that if we wait a few months, we will have projects in front of us that we would rather have spent this money on, I don't see why we wouldn't hang on to a few dollars just in case.
Well, we probably will have a few dollars left.
I think that's,
Just a few, just a few.
well, I think that's a
Marco,
good
he
point.
has-
Yeah, Marco.
No, I was gonna add something to that ramp conversation. I don't know if that's moving backwards or not, but ramps that are truly accessible have lots of rules and regulations, pitch, slope, landing, clearance, handrails. So that could be historic looking, but I wouldn't wanna fund something that wouldn't meet all those codes and then
Right.
not meet a part of the code and then not be a truly accessible ramp. So if we did get something like that, like I could probably look at it and make sure, but we would have to be careful not to just approve something that looks appropriate or looks right, when it really could have lots of other rules governing it.
And it sounds
And
to
then-
me just like we're straining to figure out some way that we can approve a project, and I'm not sure anybody is really sold on.
My suggestion is that we just do the stucco repair, the stucco and trim painting, and the lighting fixtures, which comes to $32,000.
Well, I didn't finish
I'm
telling
just
you.
suggesting,
Okay,
that's just my
I
suggestion.
had a few more things to share about, but also I do think that your point is well taken, because think about how enthusiastic everybody was about the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, and
It was on the news the
how,
other night,
and, right,
that
and
we
how,
gave them the money.
oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
So just think about that compared to this project and how everybody felt so strongly in support of that. So what if, like, the next funding round, there's another project that's like the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, or that it's something that everybody can completely get behind, but we don't have enough money because we spent it on a lot of these projects that were not as desirable.
I just have one
Yeah,
question,
okay.
one quick question.
Go ahead.
So you don't have to spend all the money?
No,
No.
you don't have to spend any money.
You don't have to spend
No,
any
you
money?
don't have to spend any money.
We didn't spend any the first year because we weren't ready, so it carries over
That I
to the
get,
next year.
that I get, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I'm used to grants being, you have to spend it by the end of the year.
Yeah, no,
And
we.
because that's the idea of the purpose, but,
This is,
Yeah.
CPA is set up different than the
Yeah.
CDBG and the rest of it.
Yeah.
We can roll it over and they don't come back. Anyways, I don't feel we should be trying to set stuff in reserve for next year for something for something that may come before us. If we've got something good in front of us and we like it, and we can fund it, we should. If we don't like it, if anything else, we should just, that should be in the back of our minds, boy, this really ain't that great. No,
Yeah.
it's not that great, that's it. I mean, and I'll do it. And as far as the funds for next year, right, I already know the boys club is gonna come in well under budget. That rolls back into the fund. Some of these other ones are gonna come in under budget. It rolls back into the fund. They don't get the extra to spend. So that's gonna be there. And just because we put it forward, we got it was very non-controversial, the first batch. Nothing says the city council is gonna approve it. Don't forget that.
That's true.
All right? So it could be up, if they can say no, and then it's back in the fund.
Right.
But one thing I noticed that at city council is they asked you, are there any projects that the CPC rejected? And really, the way things are going, really, no projects have yet been rejected. And I'm just wondering if that they might think about that, like, they're just accepting everything, what's going on? You know, so they might want to see that there's some kind
Well,
of
I don't think we're gonna.
criteria.
I don't think we're gonna accept all the developer incentives.
Uh-huh.
Well, we can't, we don't have the money to do it.
Yeah.
Right, so, you
there's gonna
know,
be, it's gonna be rejected.
that- yeah,
As an effect.
exactly.
Okay, so the other, back to 43 Canal Street, I also asked about the exterior lighting, and he said that should be fine, provided it passes the historic standards, and it's, it's attached to the building. As for the signage, this, I also asked Crystal Barnes, the city solicitor, and she said I learned on my own that interpretive signage is not allowable under the Department of Revenue. And Crystal Barnes said that even though some CPAs do allow it, she thinks we should just follow what the DOR says on that. I also asked Stuart Saginor, and he said creating an entirely new sign that isn't attached to the building is a problem, because CPA funding isn't designed for interpretive displays. If it's rehabilitating a historic sign, that would be fine, and I don't think that's the situation. He doesn't have a sign. I actually asked him. So He said, again, we would need the advice of a historic professional to see the sign, text and design, but, you know, it sounds like it might be safer not to allow that, according to the Department of Revenue anyway. And also just, I don't know if everybody knows this, but I found out that the mayor already signed off on all the projects that city council approved. But I don't know if he signed, I don't see how, he couldn't have signed off on the Victory Theater because that hasn't
Yeah,
been,
that hasn't gone through
Right.
yet.
right. Let's see, also with Crystal Barnes, oh, sorry, I was jumping ahead to item 3, discussion of remaining projects, but can we do that, Elaine?
What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about now. You lost
Item
me.
4.
Oh, maybe that's
Are
what
we
we're
done,
working
you
on.
mean, are we done with item 3?
Oh, this is still item 3, it has 3 twice, okay. Crystal Barnes, I asked her about, I was just letting her know about how it might be important for her to meet with us. Elaine, I know you wanted her to come, but she's busy almost every evening of the week, the city
Yeah,
solicitor.
we can meet during the day,
Oh, we can?
you and I,
Oh, okay, but I
if
thought,
that's okay with you.
she said she needed to know more. I was asking her about the contract, like, because most CPA communities look at a boilerplate contract and agree on it, and then, you know, develop the conditions with the staff and the city solicitor.
Right.
So she's looking into getting something from Alicia Zoller, and she could meet like 10 or 11 certain days next week. So I said to her, how about 11 a.m. on Tuesday? Is that a time that you could do it?
Tuesday, I'll have to
Next
look,
week.
I'll have to look at my.
Okay, well, we can talk. I shared the applications with her, because she said she needed to see that in order to think about what conditions should be in the contract. So, okay. The only other thing is that the Holyoke Boys and Girls Club, they were very excited, you know, that they got, you know, the full funding. They didn't know if it was official yet. I said, yes, it is. And they invited all of us to a celebration, appreciation dinner, but I don't know if that's okay to go to something like that, but I can pass it around. I don't know.
It's okay if you pay for the tickets.
No, what I mean is, no, I think we'd be invited, but I don't know if there's like the legality of that.
I think there's a fee for the tickets if you
You'll have to
go.
ask Crystal.
Yeah, I asked her, so.
It says complimentary celebration.
Oh, so if it's free, it's usually.
Well, yeah, so if it's free, but it's,
Yeah.
it's a celebration to celebrate Nick Cosmo Jr. and to celebrate Kelly School, so anybody's able to attend.
Oh, anybody can attend.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that's good. Okay, no worries there. Okay.
Okay, so that's the end of item 3. Is there any questions? Yes, Mike.
Madam Chairman, what is the status now of 123 Pine Street? Are we going
They're
to,
meeting next week and then they're gonna come and tell us if it's a go.
if they get the additional funding?
Well,
No, if their board has accepted the
Yeah,
developer's plan.
yeah.
Okay,
All right, so that's where we are with that. And hopefully we can meet the same night. I'm hoping we can, our next meeting date can be April 3rd.
Uh-huh.
I hope. I mean, we'll have to see, but that's where we'll figure that out after. Any other questions for number 3? Okay, item 4, discussion of remaining projects. So we just discussed about 123. We can't do anything about that tonight. We have to wait till next Wednesday.
So, can I,
Yes.
okay, so now that we've got Marco and Israel here, I'll do it really quick again.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
because I think we should go ahead and vote on this one right now and get it out of the way. It breaks my heart, but the train station is in a lot worse shape. I will need to walk through. Gas and electric has kept it heated. It's not leaking too badly, but there's sections of the roof that are pulling, the supporting structure is pulling apart now also. And it's sagging down, so it's not just a matter of replacing the slate. The entire roof and probably the framework of the roof, all the rafters, all the trusses are probably going to have to be worked on. If it's a historic renovation, these trusses are carved. They're not just a chunk of wood. They're carved. They're decorative.
So heavy timber, it's like a heavy timber.
Yep. Also, there's asbestos in the basement. There's, on the upper floors, there's asbestos tiles that were installed. even though they haven't been tested, I can tell you from my experience, they are gonna test positive.
Those are 9 by 9
They're
inches.
9 by 9, yeah. So, and the stuff in the basement is absolutely, I can guarantee that's 100%, 101%, that's gonna,
That's like pipe insulation.
pipe insulation, thermal pipe insulation, and it's on the floor also in some areas. There's significant structural, non-engineered, just somebody over the years with a chainsaw opened up a section of floor, put a conveyor in down there, so it's a whole section of the supporting beam has been chainsawed out, and it's just supported by steel pipe, like a cellar jacks like you'll see in a house or something. The north wall of the building, the actual facade of the building, the granite blocks are starting to buckle out also. I thought originally the whole building was solid granite. It's not. The upper sections appear to be just a granite facade on brick, and the weather's gotten to it, and you can actually see it bowing out. It's on its way towards gravity taking over. So I don't think a $150,000 developer incentive would incentivize anybody to do anything at all right now. If we're going to do something with that on the CPA level, you're looking at something that we talked about before. It's millions of dollars.
So I take it that the news here from your professional expertise is that we should just pass on this developer incentive because it's not worth tying our money up for.
Correct. It's not 150.
Yeah,
You need a lot more than 150.
okay.
Okay,
So
a
I
lot
will
more.
make that motion. I don't
Second.
like it either, but it's reality.
It's reality. Yes.
There's a second, Mike, you're seconding?
Yes.
And, any discussion, any more
Yeah,
discussion?
I have a couple questions. So if the, heavy timber is usually like, big chunky, wood trusses that are holding up the structure, is it at such a point where you could spend some money just to prop up those or replace those individual members? Or if we say no, then that roof sounds like it's going to collapse in a couple of months or a couple of years or.
Not a couple of months, but it's sections of it are already starting to collapse.
So,
All right.
We can't fix part of it and then have no one do the
Right,
rest of
we
the
ended up in
project.
the same situation as we were talking about with the other building,
Yeah.
where we spent some money and then later on, the money
Also,
spent.
isn't an application we have before us. Presumably in July, if somebody did want to do that, they could apply for the funds to do that.
Yeah, that's not saying we're not ever going to. If someone comes forward and wants to spend the money, we would certainly consider giving them some, money for a developer incentive.
I'm not super familiar, like I saw your email, I'm like, oh, I can't go. I'd love, if you took photos, I'd love to see some photos.
I did.
So maybe afterward, I guess I just feel like if there was a way to put a Band-Aid that might extend the potential for somebody else coming in, it doesn't sound like that's what other members want to do.
It's
But
beyond a Band-Aid.
Well,
It needs a tourniquet, heart surgery, and
Yeah, and also
It's-
Marcos himself has said that that's the least, unfortunately, that's the one that's kind of least probable in terms of a developer compared to the others.
yeah. See, I would be, if we had an actual proposal in front of us for here's how we can secure the building better under these circumstances, I think that would be a different conversation. It's just that we don't have that proposal. We have a
Right.
proposal for a developer incentive, and
correct. We can only act on what's in front of us.
Yep.
we asked them to revise it once, and the answer was, no, that's not worth our time.
What it needs right now is what happened with the merry-go-round. Somebody has to form a 501, Friends of the Oil Train Station, 501(c), and, start raising some money, and,
And then we could have them all, they did.
Yeah, or,
Maybe, I
yeah,
mean, if that would be the will of the committee. Okay, so, all in favor of not funding the train station?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, or
Unanimous?
Is that unanimous?
Unanimous?
Is that unanimous?
Unanimous.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, although I would characterize it as not funding the
Unfortunate.
developer incentive rather than not funding the train station, because we
Yeah.
just, and for the record, I think we all remain very enthusiastic about the train station, and if a realistic proposal comes before us, we would be interested in funding.
And I'll put that in the presentation. Well, actually,
You won't have to
we
mention.
don't have to do anything.
Yeah,
We
but just
don't-
for
we
the
don't present
record,
the ones
as
that come
Mark
forward.
If
goes
anybody
out,
asks.
Mark said,
At the meeting, they did say they wanted some sort of final accounting of what projects were or were not funded.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
all,
Well, we can.
all they're,
Yeah.
yeah, all they're really asking for is, at some point, they'd like to meet the CPA committee, discuss the projects, and, you know, have a friendly back and forth as to how it went. That was the
Oh.
first year.
sounds good.
It's very, it's just a,
Okay.
it's not, it's not, it's not
Where are we up to that?
it's not a Senate
Okay.
inquisition or, you know,
Thank you.
Mueller.
I forgot to kind of go over this a little with you, and I just,
This was self-explanatory.
well, there was one thing that I can add to it that I can give you now, which will help. Now, again, keep in mind that Andrew did not meet with me, so I was doing this on my own, but I think it's correct, and I've gone over it pretty carefully. So what I wanted to say is, like, if you line them up like this, that first page that says funding based on all projects CPA has approved, so in other words, these are the ones that City Council has approved, so it does not include the Victory Theater on there. You can see, if you line the two pages up, that all those, figures go across, so they refer to the same projects. So at the bottom, you might want to just add this 562,457. And I'm just saying, add that number to the bottom, just write it down, 562,457,
What is that?
because that's the amount
The-
that would have to be taken from, because I added up the two amounts that go over historic and open space to get that number. So this is the amount,
In the reserved amount? Is that what you're talking about, the reserved amount, 52,965?
wait, that would mean that we've already gone over what we can spend. Okay, yeah, I'm confusing myself a little. Oh, no, the amount is 730, right, okay. So the amount that is left over that can be rolled over anywhere, you see it says 735,147
Right.
under reserved amounts.
Mhm.
So we've already spent 562,457.20 cents of that amount.
Oh, the 750.
So there's only 222,400, oh, sorry. Sorry. This number's confusing.
Reserve that could be used for historic.
So, anyway, if you want to look at, just look at what I put here. So this is if all the projects are funded in full, including the Victory Theater and all the developer incentives, but obviously that's not the case anymore. And we have to spend, we would need that much out of the over $1 million. So we're not doing that. And if this last one shows if only 123 Pine Street is funded, we would need 787,927 out of the unreserved amount, which is 753,270.
That's not what I read, and I took off the two developer incentives, and I wrote
So
down.
if you look at this last one here,
Mhm.
so what I did is I added these two together and got this number, but we only had this amount, 735, and this is how much
Yeah,
we would
but
have to.
where did you get
That's
those?
why we still had.
Two numbers. Where are
This
they?
is the amount that it goes over what's in the reserve. There's only 102,000 that's in each of these reserves, because it's 10%, so we have to take some from the unreserved. This is the amount we have to take from the unreserved. So I'm just adding those two amounts together and saying, okay, that's more than what's left over in the unreserved. See?
Oh, right, but you included all these things in there. Those
Well, you're looking at a different one. I'm looking at this one.
Oh.
This one is if we were to fund everything in full, which we're not doing.
Right,
So this is
well,
closer.
let's do this first and then we'll figure out this, to see if we're okay.
Go tech boys.
I mean, you know, let's figure out what we're doing in the projects and then if it doesn't work, well, we have to come back here and fix it.
Well, we need to know now whether there's enough money to fund the projects you're voting on.
Right, so but we didn't vote on it yet, so we don't know.
Well, you do know that you can't vote on all of the, you can't vote to approve one developer incentive and all the other projects that we haven't voted on yet. We don't have enough.
Right. Exactly.
That's what I'm pointing out.
So, I understand that, I know that,
We
and
don't have enough
if
money
we,
to fund one
if we,
developer
Yeah,
incentive.
so this is what I was curious about.
Okay.
This number.
so we need to vote on, let's, ladies and gentlemen, we need to vote
Well,
on.
this is also clean. That might be the non-reserved amount for this particular one, but this amount is the full undesignated, this number here.
Okay,
Yes, but we've already designated it to things that have been approved. So basically, we have this amount, plus maybe the 50, but that's not in play because housing.
Okay, maybe you're right.
And
okay.
the bottom line here is if we are waiting on Pine Street, and it sounds like we are waiting on Pine Street,
Mhm.
we have to not apply that 150 to anything else while we find out whether.
It's
course.
already encumbered, right?
Right.
It's already
That's the word.
encumbered.
Yeah.
Oh, I see
So,
what you're saying.
I'm learning this lesson.
Yeah, I was telling you the wrong thing. It is, she's right.
Over
Yes.
$22,000.
But let's finish
Not
doing
much.
what we can do tonight, okay?
We can't do anything tonight.
Yeah, we
Yes,
can't do
can,
anything.
because I would like to hear a motion that we don't fund the Armory.
Okay, I will make
Developer
that motion.
incentive. Okay, and any discussion, I mean, at this point in time, I don't think that the Armory is ready to come forward with the project, so
Okay.
that's why
Yes, no,
I'm making that suggestion.
I am good with that. I am happy to make that motion.
Okay.
So
Any other
what
discussion on the Armory?
are we doing? We're not, so.
We're not gonna fund it.
Oh, okay, so what are they asking for in
A
particular?
developer incentive of
I
$150,000.
can't speak on that anyways, I just want
Yeah.
to hear the clarification.
Yeah, I know, there's a
Okay.
lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So any other discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hand so I'll know if everybody's in
I
agreement
don't
with
think I
that.
can vote on that. I used to work for them.
Used to.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so it was unanimous. Okay, so, and then the other two projects that we haven't talked about is the Maple Street and the flats. So my suggestion about the flats is that we only fund 30,000 of that 55,
We
the
can.
stucco. But I'm just saying that, you know, keep that in mind, that if it turns out we can fund 30,000 on that project, it's a possibility in the 17 for Maple Street. I don't know if we can or not. I think we need Andrew to come to figure out when we get right down to those last two.
I would
Yeah.
make the counter suggestion that we not fund the flats because it is not clear we have the money to do it anyway. And it's obviously a complicated project. We're not sure how much of it we can fund. We will have to have all kinds of consultants to decide on whether the stucco is appropriate and the dormers are appropriate.
And that's been done already. We've had a letter of recommendation from the Holyoke Historical
Yeah, the
Commission.
stucco's good. That's the only part of that project that's good, is the stucco.
Yeah,
And that's why I'm okay with
Yeah,
it.
I'm still inclined to vote against it because I just don't see it as important as any of the other things that have come before us. But that's
So
just
let's-
me.
Yeah, well, we can't decide, you know, that's what we'll have to decide down the road, yes or no on that, on those two projects, the Maple Street and the Flats, 43 Canal. So, and that's where we have to stay at this point in time until we meet next week and find out what's gonna happen with the 123
Yeah.
Pine Street.
Well, do we want to vote tonight on 43? I mean,
It's your pleasure, it's up to you guys.
you had mentioned an amount of 30,000.
Yes, but we're not sure if we don't have that. We're not sure if we have the 30,000 and the 17 to do, we might not have the 30, maybe we'll only have the 17 to do Maple Street. So I think we need to wait until we meet Andrew here to give us a final tally here, what's.
One,
And if I may, looking at the meeting minutes from the last meeting, it says stucco repair, 25 to 27,000. And then it says stucco and trim painting, another $2,500
Oh, right,
to
it's
$3,000.
32,000 with the lighting. Yes, those are the three parts that he prioritized. It's 32,000.
At any rate, we obviously need to know about about Pine Street, and we need to hear from Andrew, because if we fund Pine Street, we have $22,689.81, which is not enough to,
Nothing says we have to fund Pine Street for their full request. Right.
well, nothing says we have to fund it at all.
Right. Well, I don't know.
Didn't you say something about something going under bidding anyways? It's like money
Yeah, but
coming
we
back.
can't,
You
Yeah,
can't,
we
yeah, you can't
can't-
rely on
we
that.
can't appropriate
Yeah,
more
yeah,
than we have.
Yeah.
That'll go into next
They
year.
can always,
I got what you're saying.
they can always come back
I
to
got
us
what you're
again
saying.
next year for the,
I do have a question, is the Victory Theater decision final
yes,
by this committee?
yes.
Okay, so I have to get that in
I have it.
before Friday.
Just asking.
One of the questions I almost got caught on, was that vote unanimous?
No,
It was not, and I have that in here, I have all the details, it was a 3-2 vote. This is two-sided. This is what I want to do on every single project, because, and I can give you all a copy of it so you can see. This is what we're supposed to do for every project when we present to the city council.
thank you.
So you can see on the back, there's a part with measures of success, funding conditions, and then you say what exactly where the money will come. And then there's another document, which I don't have to show you, where we're supposed to literally say like which budget reserve, like whether, you know, how much out of housing and how much out of the undesignated, you know, so it's all very clear what people are approving.
Mhm.
Like, you know, it's just way to make sure everyone's on the same page and there's no problems later. Oh, sorry, you should have one of these too. Did you get them?
Thank you.
So the funding condition, like the first bullet point, is a little silly in a way, because I put the grantee agrees to execute the proposed project in compliance. Oh, no, wait, that's not the one. Okay, maybe this doesn't have it. I thought that I had put it.
Well, it says specific conditions, but it doesn't, of the scope of work, but it doesn't spell out the specific conditions.
Because that's going to be in the, In the contract.
agreement, the final contract, the agreement, yeah. And does this say that they're not going to get the funding from us unless they have started?
well, this is
The
not
full
a contract.
No, but
It
this
could
is
be
for city
clearer, but
council.
it's there. It is in funding conditions, and it says no disbursements of funds may occur until a project has received all necessary permitting and approvals. I would strengthen that language.
Yes, I would too.
That's the intent of that clause.
If you want me to add something to it, I can do
Well,
so.
I think,
Okay.
well, not at this point in time, maybe, I think, Mike, when you are presenting this, and I would make copies of all this and put it on their desk for the meeting.
Yeah,
But I would say to them that this is contingent, and it's gonna be in the agreement that they're not gonna get this unless they have started the construction, the full construction of the, you know,
So they have
of
all
the,
funds
of the,
necessary to complete the project.
the project, yeah. In other
so
words,
if I understand this, we're tying up $100,000 on something that might not start for
For 20
years.
well, no, according to them, they're gonna start in July.
Well,
I've heard that for 10 years
Well,
now.
then but that's
So
right.
then put the deadline.
So look at it this way, we'll have $100,000 back in our kitty for projects for next year.
Also, it was a little hard because the last section where I spoke with Kathy McKean about what should I put for other funding sources, you know, I just had multiple funding sources to be determined since there are so many things that are kind of
Yeah.
up in
They
the air.
have have loads of funding
Most, you know,
sources.
usually we would be able to put down what the other funding source is.
Well, they have loads, they have
Well,
there is
we
multiple,
refer-
that's, you're not kidding
We will,
about that.
yeah,
That's
we
good
refer to
work.
their full application and incorporate it by reference.
Amy, on page 2,
I have some more copies that I made by accident if you want to have them, since if you're going to be sharing this with the
No,
city
I've got to
council.
make a dozen anyways. I've got a two-sided copier.
Amy, would you want to make edits to this anyway before it goes to?
Well, do we have time? I would like to, if we can.
To what?
He
Make
just
some
needs
edits.
He just needs to
Make some
edit.
edits to this form before the next meeting, which
Before you give it out to city council.
I think this is fine I mean, I think at this point in time it is.
I don't think we can amend something that's been voted on.
we hadn't,
Well,
this is not,
We
we
didn't
did not
vote
vote on
on
this
this,
form.
I mean, we just voted
That's just
to
a face sheet
do the
sheet.
funding.
This is just something I wrote up, based on what other communities do, and I didn't quite know how to answer some of these sections, so I'm glad to have your feedback on it.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, we did not, to try to clear this up, we did not have this form before us, and we did not vote on this form. We voted in principle to give them the 100,000 for the chandeliers or whatever it was,
Wisconsin.
Responses, yeah.
on the understanding that no funds would be dispersed until they were able to launch the full project and with some kind of a deadline to give it back. And we left everything else basically to be drafted before it went to you. But this does not reflect, I don't think necessarily, and I don't want to speak for the
No,
This
it
majority.
doesn't
isn't a
reflect
contract,
it.
Mike, this isn't a, this
So
is
it's not
just,
legal binding?
And no,
Right.
this is just something
This
I
is just
based on
FYI.
what another
this
community
is just for
does.
information.
Right, now I get that.
And also, we just spotted a glaring typo, Holyoke on the top, so it does need to be edited, so.
yeah, is that the second page? Because it says
Yeah.
Holyoke Conservation Commission, is that right? On that first paragraph?
Oh, I left out
Historical Commission,
historic.
maybe.
Yeah, so that's another edit, so it's good to have your input, plus Holyoke is misspelled, so there are some edits I have to make in it.
And,
So this
I don't
is-
want to speak for the majority because I was one of the no votes, but I don't think that this was what was voted on. I mean, I
No, this
Yeah.
is just something
I
that
think-
I'm saying, you know,
Yeah.
a format
This
that we can
in
follow.
The format and the conditions are, I think, amendable because the majority was not wedded to them. They wanted something stronger than what appears here.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I really would like the committee to talk about conditions, because I'm left with, oh, I've got to put something down here, and I don't know if I'm covering all the bases. We haven't really talked to the city solicitor, the committee hasn't really made a decision on all this, so that's why I want to put it in writing and have people agree on it, the conditions, before
Yeah.
it's presented.
Have people named how many years they would want the money to be encumbered before it gets returned?
Yes, yes.
How many, I've heard that voiced as a concern a few times, and I have it in the notes, but I don't really have a time frame. And I'm sure Amy
We
would want that
didn't
for
mention
this.
anything but my own, I'm thinking by 2020, next year.
Yeah,
You know,
because
a year, they have a year to start the project, from July 1st.
Yeah, it
to
says
June
under
30th.
measures of success, completion time is December of 2020, so we could just say this must be done by December of
Not
2020.
December,
What?
June 2020.
Completion time, she's saying.
What is she?
Completion time, so you,
Completion.
like finishing.
You mean the
project
project, the
must
whole
be
Victory
finished.
Theater?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not gonna happen by
Well,
December 2020.
I know, that's
No.
what she said, but maybe for the light fixtures
Not gonna
could be.
start with July either.
No.
No, I don't
can't-
even want to
they
give them
can't
that much
start.
time. I want them
Until
to
they-
have started construction on the project and.
The whole project.
And that we can give them the money within that year timeframe of July 1st to June 30th. That's my thinking.
Yeah, we're
That's
gonna
how I'm
have
thinking
to
about it.
collectively think hard about, exactly how to define that ultimately, because they are doing some work that I would not define as having genuinely started the project. And I think I saw a post from them just today about there being people in the building doing some kind of work that does not reflect really the beginning of full construction. And what they've been telling us all along is that until they have all of the expenses covered for this whole $45 million project, they can't even really break ground on it. And
Yeah, and when you,
we just, as I say, I don't think we're going to do it while we're sitting here, but I think we need a really sound measure.
Well, right, and it has to fit within our fiscal year of our funding, so that if they don't adhere to what we agree on, it's gonna come back to us in time for us for our next round of funding. In other words,
Oh, I
you know what I'm saying?
Unless you fund them in stages, but that's gotta be something that the
No,
committee
I
has
don't wanna
to
do
be,
that.
yeah, exactly.
No.
That has to be something.
Well, I don't know if we've made that clear to all these applicants, that you must complete this project.
No, this
by
is
the
for
end.
this, I'm not talking about everyone.
So you
but
don't feel
I-
that way for all of the projects?
Well, I don't know, yes, pretty much I do, but I'm not sure exactly, like, I don't think.
Because that might be a deal breaker for some of them if they knew they had to complete the
Well,
whole.
right, and I don't think 123 Pine Street's gonna be able to, or Chestnut Street project. I don't
What
think
about
they're gonna fit in
the
there.
playground, like,
Yes.
would it just be phase one that has to be
No,
completed?
they're
Or
gonna do phase 1
both
and 2
phases in,
by the fall
Well, but
of next year, of this year. They're gonna be done phase 1 and 2 by the fall of this year, yes.
well, that's what that guy was saying, but I don't know if that's what the actual applicants think.
Yeah, oh, no,
Well,
I
they
got
might
that
be-
information from them.
Okay,
They might be quicker than that. They're gonna try to use the park section
Wow.
for summer camp.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
they
right,
will
you
use
just
it.
say that.
Yeah,
Yes.
but at any rate, I think
But
we're losing
yeah.
sight of the fact that the NEFA project is somewhat unusual in that they
Right.
literally have told us that they can't do anything until they can do all of it. Our concern here is really just not tying up our funds forever, which is not a problem with the other projects that we're talking about.
Right.
We know that there is concrete work that will be done with the others, so when we get it back is less critical.
I don't know if all the others know that their work has to be done by the
But
end.
that's, yeah,
That's
that's
because we
gonna
didn't
be,
impose
in
We
the-
didn't say that.
that's gonna be in the agreements. Well,
But they need to know that, or because some of them
well,
might
then
back
they
out.
won't want their money,
We may
so that's
not all
fine.
have agreed to that.
That's
We
fine.
may have to re-vote on some of these
Right,
deadlines.
because these
We
are
don't
things
have
we
to
haven't
re-vote
talked
on
about.
them, they just won't accept the agreements and the
No.
money will go back into the
Wait,
plate.
no, this is back to why we have to talk about conditions when we vote. Because, I would not vote to yank funding for the Boys and Girls Club if they, for some reason, have a construction date slip and they are still working on the project and we expect the funds to
And
be
that happens all the time.
spent.
Well,
And that does happen.
we can
Whereas
always
with
change,
NEPA,
yeah, we can always accommodate, it's
You
not,
can see when somebody's making progress, when somebody's
Absolutely.
been 20 years without doing something.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that having the same condition for somebody who we know is going to spend the money unless force majeure happens is different from having a condition for, this is really pretty speculative and all we're doing is making a gesture of support. That, if lightning strikes, great, but
The only way, I mean, the vote's been taken here, but on something like this, the only way I could see getting it started, Marco, you might have some insight on this, like this, these Scots, I'm not familiar, with what they look like, but if they went ahead and rehabbed these, and they haven't started any work, and it's gonna be one of the last things I imagine installed when they rehab the place, these are gonna have to be stored somewhere.
That's right, they looked like they were large, they were the number 63, but I think it came
I
out to
have a
like,
photo,
yeah, and it came out to like $1,800 each for restoration.
1,000, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot, it was $1,800 for each one.
All right, so we let's say that we spent 100,000, these things are all restored and in boxes somewhere, right? That they remain the property of the city of Hoyle. Could they be used somewhere else in another historic?
They were like
Well,
art
that's why we don't
takeovers.
want to get them to do that project unless they're for sure going to be used for the Victory Theater. And they have to have started the project.
You want to own it anyway.
It's.
Also, the
Yeah.
idea with CPA is everything has to be a capital improvement, so it can't be something that can be moved around. It's supposed to be a fixed
Exactly,
thing. It
yeah.
can't just be a light, oh, we're gonna use it somewhere else.
No, right, exactly.
Well, it's not fixed.
No,
it's
we're not
really-
saying that we're gonna
yeah.
use some.
No, I know what you're saying, but
Yeah.
I don't think that that would be allowable. Like, it has to be a capital improvement, that-
No, but the
otherwise
problem
they
is,
shouldn't get the money.
the money thing is manageable by having the conditions of the drop dead date. And that's a simple kind of fix. You can't do this. And the award is contingent on your having 100% of the construction financing and meeting whatever targets we meet. And at that point, we'll disperse the money. Otherwise, it comes back to us at such and such a date. We just have to figure out what the dates are and get the wording down so that we know it holds up. or there is the alternative of not doing it. We already voted.
All right. Well, why don't we leave it, let's move on. We'll let the city council make the
Yeah.
tough
That's right.
decision.
Let
I have
them-
a feeling this one's in for one hell of a rough ride.
Yeah, let's, yeah,
This is
let
gonna
them,
be controversial. I already
Yeah.
know it's gonna be
let
controversial.
them call it Victory Theater people, and I mean, you know, we can only tell them what we know, but they,
Or they'll,
They'll need to call
or they'll
them.
send it to committee. This one will probably.
that's what I mean.
My guess is this one will go to.
Elaine, are you saying that this would have to be
This ain't
done
gonna get
before
decided on the
July of
floor.
this year?
But, no,
No,
I can work
Okay.
with Amy to tighten
I
this.
said-
up.
Okay.
yeah, July 1st to July 30th next year.
Of next year?
Or June 30th. Okay.
July 1st to June 30th.
Yeah.
When do you want this to introduce it?
Well, I have to, by noon on Friday, I have to, but I can just put the simple basic thing in to get it to go to the council for Tuesday. More than likely, it's not gonna go through on the floor,
Yeah.
or it's gonna get rejected.
You never know, Mike.
Never know. I learned my lesson last time, but
But if Amy
more
and
than likely, this
So
one.
if Amy and I get you a revised document by Tuesday morning, that'll be timely for you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So.
but I've still gotta put what we've got,
Yeah,
but I'm gonna put in, you know, is that,
And we email you the document.
yeah, and if we can get you a better document by Friday, we'll do it.
yep, yep.
So I'll email you the Word document.
Okay, any other discussion or questions or concerns at this point in time?
Do we wanna, try to vote on some of the others? I mean,
No, we can't.
Maple
We
Street.
don't know what we got left.
well, if we know there's some we don't wanna do, I mean,
Well, we don't know that till we vote, so why do we have to vote on it tonight?
You already voted against the Armory and,
Well,
the
We already did the 2 voter incentives, I was voter incentives,
and with money.
Right.
the developer incentives.
Order incentives will work.
Mike, come back to it.
Yeah.
Make a proposal.
well, Maple Street, I've got a
There's 3
problem.
left, 123 Pine Street, Maple Street, and 42 Canal.
Maple Street, it's supposed to be visible to the public. The backside is only visible to the public because the building was torn down. There's nothing saying that that's gonna stay a vacant
Oh, I
lot
didn't realize
forever.
that.
Which
All right,
one is Maple
or that, or to stop the owner of the other property from putting up bushes or a fence or anything else that would block the visibility of it. That's number one. Number two, the whole thing, it's gone through so many different, I own this, I don't own it, that we're doing this part, we're not doing this part. You know, right now, it'd be nice, but I would rather see it more organized and more,
He's also deeply in debt.
yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of issues.
yeah. I'd vote against, right now, I'd make a motion not to approve this one.
Second.
I would need an explanation real quick on what project this one is.
So-
Or I would just
Let's get rid
I
of
would just stand because I'm new.
You can't abstain.
All right, so I need to
We don't
know.
allow abstentions, you gotta.
So,
Just say present.
yeah, I don't wanna say no to somebody or say yeah in regards to the project, I mean, without knowing the details.
That's our only.
That's not fair to them.
project.
I feel
Yeah,
like
that's good.
it's a private project.
Right, that's not
It would
fair.
take
not
a
working
while
out
for
here.
us to
No,
explain
it's
it. I think we should wait on it, but,
Well, I
I
think
mean, he
we need
needs
to vote
to.
on it. We've got 5 people who have been present for the
Yeah.
entire discussion.
You can abstain.
Okay.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's fine with me, I don't know.
It's all right, go ahead. So, any other discussion? Okay, those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Okay, pass the majority that's here tonight.
So is that 4 to 2?
3 to 2.
It's 4 to 1.
Or one with
Yeah.
everyone's
Oh, okay,
abstaining.
4 to 1, okay.
41, 1 exception.
I'm sorry.
No, it makes sense.
Next time I'll have it.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's not
Yeah,
so
you know,
much.
you're coming in late.
Yeah.
You're-
I just don't, so I'm a person that's on fairness, so like,
Yeah,
in
no,
regards
I agree.
to like putting a deadline on one project, I would feel that then you would have to kind of do the same thing on a lot of other projects.
Exactly.
Because I'm all about fairness, that's how I feel.
43.
even if it is that, it means that, like, they gotta rush their project, that's just,
Well, they're already.
if someone else has to do it, that's just how I feel.
Are you talking about the Victory Theater?
No, in general across the board, like moving forward, like that's the way I roll. Like I would want, if I'm gonna put a restriction on one person,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously everything's not gonna be the same because projects are different in scope. But if I'm gonna
You
put a
guys,
restriction
have
on one,
something to say, please say,
Then
that we
I'm-
can all talk.
I'm gonna put a restriction.
Somebody's talking.
Yeah,
I love
well,
it.
that's why they, usually CPA communities agree on a template for a grant, but then they do adjust some things. for
As you
each
go,
Project, but they try to use the same type of template for the
Okay.
contracts, you know.
I don't know, that would be great then, because then that way across the board it's the same all the time. Because I wouldn't want, I don't know, it to feel like the committee has a favorite or something like that. It just has to be the same across the board. That's just how I would.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right in principle. I think a lot of our problem is that, as you will see as you go forward, we have a lot of apple speed compared
Yeah,
to
yeah.
currant speed compared to coconuts.
So oranges and
It's
coconuts,
really-
yeah.
You know, we're going to a certain extent case by case because the situations are so different.
Yeah,
But,
So
but no, I don't disagree with you in principle.
No.
yeah.
I'll just keep things moving, I'll try another motion. If anybody wants to approve 32,000 for 43 Canal Street.
I'll second
For what? I'm sorry, what are you?
32,000
For what?
dollars for
For what?
43 Canal for the stucco work.
If funds are available, which they may not be.
Funds are
that. Well,
available.
they will if we don't spend 17.
Funds are
We're not doing the Maple Street
We're
project.
not doing the Maple Street project, we are reserving 150 in case we do Pine Street. That leaves us with 22,700 or so.
Yeah, but you're not sure about that amount.
Yes, I,
Nothing says we have to award 150,000 because they asked for it. We could award them 125,000.
We can say provided there's funds available.
well,
I mean, let's, wait, I didn't want to vote on these until we find out from Andrew exactly
Yeah, I would feel more comfortable.
what kind of money we have, but that's under discussion. That's my feeling, is that we shouldn't be voting on that right now because we don't know if we have the money for it.
You seconded it.
I voted under discussion. Under discussion, I'm saying that I'm telling you that I'd rather not vote on it right tonight because of the fact we're not sure of the funding.
yeah, I think it is
At this
much
point in time.
easier.
But if the committee wants to vote on it, I'll vote on it.
Well, I know we do have the funding to do that. It might not leave us enough
We
funding.
might not, we might not though, so we're not sure. We're cutting it very close here, and but anyways.
No, I think it is easy under current circumstances to vote against funding a project. It is harder to vote for because we have questions outstanding. And I'm with you, I would rather not vote on this until we know what else we're doing.
All right, so it only leaves us two projects left, 123 Pine and 42 Canal.
And if there's any way, Israel, that you can go to Amy, visit Amy when she's in her office, she can show you the applications for those.
Oh, I emailed.
Can you email
I
it to me?
sent it, did you get it?
Oh, yeah, I did actually.
Yeah, I sent you a link
A
to.
Google Doc
uh-huh.
to be
Google
able to.
Drive, yeah.
Drive.
But also, if you just want to come back, if you want to make a plan just to talk, because it's very complicated.
What times are you?
Well, my hours are very limited, so we should
Yeah, girl.
just decide on a time through email, and then I can meet you.
Alright,
You
because
know,
mine are pretty
check it
similar
out.
too. I'm on campus all day.
Oh, okay,
At
well,
Mass.
But you could also just
I'm
email
like you,
me.
I just came in from here, like from work.
Yeah, we could talk on the
That's
phone
fine.
too, or I could email you if you have a.
Yeah, if you have questions.
Yeah, I'll have questions and I'll make sure to
Okay.
reach out
Yeah.
after I review.
Will you make, I make a motion, you withdraw that motion on 43 Canal Street, just to make it,
Yes.
okay, is that all right with the committee, that we withdraw that motion?
Yeah, withdraw.
Okay, all in favor, aye. Okay. All right, next meeting date. So, April 3rd is doable for me, and I'd like to be here that night so we can make a decision about 122 Pine.
Yeah.
Before things go too far here. So, is that something that looks good for everyone? 6:45.
Yeah,
Sorry, what was the date again?
April 3rd at 6:45.
Okay.
And, that's.
Here or city council?
We don't know yet because,
And the only other thing that will after, that will be one of our discussions, and then the other thing is we'll have to start thinking about agreements for the projects that we've already passed, what conditions we want to put on those projects, because we need to convey that to the law department so they can put the agreement together with these
so maybe,
Applicants.
you could
projects.
let me know if you can meet at that time.
Oh, and I can do afternoon, I can't do morning.
Oh, she can only do morning. I think, she's really being pulled everywhere. The city's battling all kinds of issues right now.
Story of our lives.
She's got a meeting every single evening and.
What
she
about
can almost
afternoons?
every-
I can't do Wednesday and Thursday.
Well, she said 10 or 11.
Every day, that's the
Well,
only time she can.
I'll
do it.
ask again, but why don't you let me know what your availability is?
I'm telling
Okay,
you,
so-
afternoons, and
So
not
which days?
any day but Wednesday or Thursday,
Okay.
afternoons though. Monday, Tuesday, Friday, afternoons.
I mean, I don't know. She may have other things, but we'll see.
Okay. Is that it? Anything else under other business? Amy, you're all set?
Yeah, so we decided on the next meeting for April 3rd, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
And the only one moving forward to the council is the victory.
Yes.
yeah, but we're going to email you with
Yeah.
those changes.
Yeah.
Okay, a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye, no discussion.
We